The quiet of an on-call room has its own unique frequency. It's a low hum of exhaustion, antiseptic, and the distant, muffled beeps of machines keeping the residents of Northstead Heart Institute tethered to life. At 2 a.m., that hum is a lullaby I've learned to sleep through. But tonight, there was a different sound. A piercing, insistent shriek that cut through the sterile silence. A sound I hadn't heard in my 3 years as a cardiologist here. It wasn't the hospital paging system. It was the secure line, a relic from a benefactor with a penchant for privacy, installed in only 3 rooms and gathering dust. Until now. I lifted the heavy receiver, my voice thick with sleep. Dr. Merrick. A man's voice, low and smooth like gravel rolling in silk, came through the line. There was no greeting, no introduction, just a current of command that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Patient is Morella Riva. End-stage heart failure. A house call is required. Absolute discretion is mandatory. The words hung in the air, each one a polished stone dropped into a still pond. House call for end-stage heart failure. That was a job for a hospice team, not a specialist yanked from a hospital shift, but it was the name that stopped my breath. Riva. The name was a key, unlocking a door in my memory I'd long since bricked over. Suddenly, I wasn't Dr. Lila Merrick, 32 clad in scrubs that smelled faintly of coffee and fatigue. I was 16 again. I was in the derelict dugout of the old Ashbrook baseball field, the scent of summer rain on dry dirt filling my lungs. I was feeling the hesitant, calloused fingers of a boy with eyes the color of a stormy sea trace the line of my jaw. Cassian Riva. My first everything. First real kiss. A clumsy, breathtaking collision under a sky bruised with twilight. First boy I'd ever thought I loved. And then, he was gone. Vanished after a night of sirens and shattered glass down by the river. A local news story that whispered of family trouble and then fell silent. He disappeared from my life as quickly and completely as a phantom. Doctor. The gravelly voice on the line pulled me back to the cold reality of the on-call room. I cleared my throat, forcing the 16-year-old girl back into her sealed-off chamber. My specialty is interventional cardiology, not palliative care. A patient in her condition should be in a hospital setting. That is not an option, the voice stated. It wasn't a negotiation. A car is waiting at the physician's entrance. It will be there in 5 minutes. The line went dead. My mind raced, weighing protocol against a gut instinct screaming with curiosity and a long dormant ache. This was wrong, unorthodox, dangerous, maybe. But Morella Riva, Cassian's mother, the woman who'd always had a kind smile for the gangly girl who followed her son around like a shadow. My feet were moving before I'd made a conscious decision. I shed my scrubs for the street clothes I kept in my locker, pulling on a pair of sensible dark pants and a sweater, my doctor's bag feeling unnaturally heavy in my hand. The car was exactly as promised, a sedan the color of ash, with no license plates. The windows were so heavily tinted they looked like sheets of obsidian. The driver, a man with a face that was a collection of hard lines and shadows, got out as I approached. He didn't speak, simply handed me a thick manila envelope before holding the rear door open. Inside, the car smelled of clean leather and something metallic, like ozone. I opened the envelope. It contained a single laminated card, an official-looking security directive from the Ashbrook Metropolitan Bureau. My face, pulled from a DMV photo, was printed next to text authorizing emergency access to any private property within city limits. It was stamped with a seal I'd never seen before. It was a perfect forgery, or something altogether more real and unsettling. We drove out of the city, leaving the slumbering lights of Ashbrook behind, and climbed into the winding roads of the surrounding hills. The gates to the Ridgecrest estate appeared out of the darkness, wrought iron behemoths that swung inward without a sound. This wasn't just a mansion, it was a fortress. The perimeter was lined with a sensor fence that pulsed with a faint, infrared glow. As we swept up the long driveway, I saw them handlers walking sleek, dark-furred dogs whose focus was as sharp as their teeth, men in dark uniforms, armed with more than just sidearms, stood sentinel at the entrance, the Riva Consortium, the papers sometimes called them, a name spoken in whispers, associated with shipping, logistics, and a host of other businesses that operated in the gray spaces of the law. The driver led me to the grand front doors, which were opened by another silent man. I was guided not into a lavish foyer, but into a small, sterile antechamber. A man was waiting for me. He was tall, built like a wall of solid rock, with a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt threat. "Doctor Merrick," he said. His voice was calm, his expression unreadable. "I'm Tarek Solano, head of security. We appreciate you coming." He gestured to a small, metallic box on a table. "Your phone, please. It will be secure." A Faraday box. No signals in, no signals out. I was being cut off from the world. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then dropped my phone into the velvet-lined interior. He closed the lid with a soft, final click. The room I was led to upstairs was a master bedroom transformed into a state-of-the-art ICU. A circulatory support machine hummed quietly in the corner, its lines ready. An IV pole stood laden with bags of medication immunosuppressants, beta blockers, anticoagulants. They were preparing for a heart transplant, but doing it here in secret. Tarek handed me a tablet with Morella's medical records. I scrolled through them, my professional focus a welcome shield. The diagnosis was correct dilated cardiomyopathy, her heart too weak and enlarged to function. But the treatment plan, it was off. The dosages for her anti-rejection meds were based on an older protocol, and the combination of diuretics listed didn't align with her most recent kidney function tests. It was subtle, but wrong. In the center of it all, propped up on a mountain of pillows, was Morella Riva. Her hair, once a rich, dark brown, was now a startling shade of platinum white. Her skin was pale and translucent, but her eyes, when they opened to look at me, held the same spark of warmth I remembered. Dr. Merrick," she rasped, her voice a fragile whisper. "Lila, you've grown into a beautiful woman." A soft, tired smile touched her lips. "Forgive the dramatic arrangements. My son is overly protective." As if summoned by her words, the door swung open. And there he was. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The boy I knew had been lean and wiry, all sharp angles and restless energy. The man who stood before me was something else entirely. Cassian Riva was carved from a different, harder material. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light in the room. He was broader in the shoulders, his presence filling the doorway, an aura of quiet, absolute authority radiating from him, but it was his face that held me captive. The boyish softness was gone, replaced by the sharp, defined lines of a man who had seen too much, and his eyes. They were the same stormy sea, but now a stillness lay over their depths, the unnerving calm of a predator. He didn't acknowledge me. His gaze went straight to his mother, softening for a barest fraction of a second. Then he turned to me, and his eyes were as flat and cold as polished steel. The boy was gone. This man was a stranger. "You're the doctor," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Dr. Merrick," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My heart was a traitor, hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He gave a curt nod, dismissing our entire shared history in a single, cold gesture. "My mother's care is your only priority. Whatever she needs, any equipment, any medication, you will have it. You will not ask questions about my affairs or my family. You will not speak of what you see here to anyone. Is that understood?" The words were spoken quietly, but they carried the weight of an iron decree. "My only concern is my patient," I replied, meeting his gaze, forcing my tone to remain clinical and detached. The pulse of the past was a drumbeat in my ears, a frantic counterpoint to the steady hum of the machines. He held my gaze for a moment longer, searching for something defiance, fear, recognition. I gave him nothing but the blank mask of a professional, satisfied. He turned his attention back to his mother, his posture softening almost imperceptibly. I moved to the bedside, my training taking over. I needed to focus on the medicine, on the data, on the failing organ inside this frail woman's chest. I needed to forget the boy who taught me how to skip stones, and the man who now looked like he could command armies. "Mrs. Riva," I began, my voice gentle, "I'm going to have a listen to your heart." She nodded, her eyes fluttering closed. I warmed the diaphragm of my stethoscope in my palm and pressed it against her thin chest. I closed my eyes, tuning out the low hum of the machines, tuning out the powerful presence of the man standing by the window, tuning out the frantic beating of my own heart. I listened. Lub-dub, lub-dub, the rhythm was weak, thready, and then I heard it. Underneath the struggling beat, there was another sound, a faint, turbulent whisper, a systolic murmur. It wasn't noted in her chart, which was meticulous in every other detail. An alarm bell, small but clear, rang in the back of my mind. I moved the stethoscope, listening to the flow across her valves. The murmur was most pronounced over the mitral valve. My eyes flicked to the IV bags again, to the specific combination of drugs being administered: sacubitril, valsartan, ivabradine, standard, powerful drugs, but with this new, undocumented murmur. And considering her recent lab work on the tablet, something felt discordant. Certain drug interactions could exacerbate valvular regurgitation. The protocol they were following wasn't just outdated, it was potentially harmful. A cold dread trickled down my spine. This wasn't just a simple case of a wealthy family wanting private care. The medical discrepancies were too precise, too specific. This was a deviation from the standard of care, a deliberate one. And in my world, a deliberate deviation that harmed a patient wasn't just a mistake. It was a weapon. I was standing in a room with a dying woman, a ghost from my past who had become a crime lord, and the chilling realization that the immediate threat to Morella Riva's life might not be her failing heart, but the very medicine meant to save her. My mind raced, the discovery of the murmur shifting my professional unease into a sharp, pointed suspicion. It was a piece of data that didn't fit the clinical picture I'd been given. In medicine, what doesn't fit is often where the truth hides. I excused myself from the room under the pretense of needing to review the digital charts in better light, leaving Cassian standing like a sentinel by his mother's bedside, in the adjoining antechamber where Tarek stood guard. I opened my medical bag on a sterile side table. My first target was the medication itself. I asked Tarek to bring me a fresh vial of the ivabradine and the sacubitril valsartan solution from their private stock. He complied without a word, his movements efficient and silent. Under the bright glare of an examination lamp I'd brought, I scrutinized the vials. The labels were professionally printed, the branding perfect. They would pass a cursory glance without a problem. But I wasn't giving them a cursory glance. I ran my gloved thumb over the lot number printed on the side of the sacubitril valsartan vial. The ink was slightly blurred, the font a fraction of a millimeter different from the crisp, clear printing on the rest of the label. It was a tiny imperfection, the kind you'd only notice if you were looking for it. I compared it to a sample image of the same drug from a trusted medical database on my encrypted tablet. The lot number on my screen was pristine. This was off. The printing didn't meet good manufacturing practice or GMP standards, a set of regulations that ensures quality. It was a small crack, but a crack was all I needed to start breaking this open. My bag contained a portable spectrophotometer, a small handheld device I used for research projects. It could analyze the chemical composition of a liquid by measuring its absorption of light. It wasn't as precise as a full lab, but it would give me a ballpark reading of the active pharmaceutical ingredients. I drew a small, precise sample from the vial Tarek had brought me and placed it in the device. I did the same with the ivabradine. The machine whirred quietly. A few moments later, the results flashed on the tiny screen. My blood ran cold. The concentration of active ingredients in both samples was dangerously low. The sacubitril valsartan was at less than 60% of its stated dosage, and the ivabradine was even lower. This wasn't just a bad batch. This was poison disguised as a cure. They were giving Morella a cocktail of placebos and underdosed medication, enough to keep her stable, but never enough to let her improve. It was a slow, methodical execution. I looked at the central line monitor feed on my tablet, which Tarek had synced for me. Morella's central venous pressure, a key indicator of the fluid status and function of her heart, was a chaotic series of peaks and troughs. Cross-referencing the timestamps, I saw the pattern immediately. Her pressure would destabilize, dipping dangerously, shortly after each scheduled infusion from the house supply. Her body was crying out for the medicine it wasn't receiving. I walked back into the main room, my face a mask of professional calm, but my insides were a knot of fury. Cassian was still by the window, his back to me. "I need to speak with you and Mr. Solano," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. The two men followed me into the hallway. I didn't waste time. "The medication you're administering to your mother is counterfeit, or at the very least, it's been severely diluted." I presented the vials, pointing out the smeared lot numbers, and showed them the readings on my spectrophotometer. The active ingredients are at critically low levels. Every time she receives a dose, her condition worsens. We are not just failing to treat her, we are actively harming her. Tarek's stony expression hardened, a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. Cassian's face remained impassive, but a muscle jumped in his jaw. "How?" was all he said. "I don't know how, but I know what we need to do. I'm discontinuing all medications from your private stock immediately. I need to take control of the entire supply chain. All of her prescriptions must be filled and delivered through the Northstead Hospital cold chain protocol, under my direct supervision. No exceptions." Tarek spoke before Cassian could. "Doctor, using a public hospital supply chain creates a paper trail. It would expose Mrs. Riva's identity and location." He said it quietly. "A statement of fact, not an argument. That presents a significant security risk." "The greater risk is watching her die from fake medicine," I countered, my voice sharp. "She is not leaving this house," Cassian said. The words were final. A steel door slamming shut. His gaze was locked on me, challenging me. "Her security is absolute." For a moment, I saw the stubborn boy from the baseball field, refusing to back down from a dare. But this was not a game. "Then you are choosing to let her die," I shot back. A tense silence stretched between us. Cassian's stormy eyes bore into mine. He was a man used to giving orders, not having them questioned, but I was a doctor fighting for a patient. In this, I was his equal. "Finally," he broke the silence. "Fine," he conceded, the word clipped. "She stays, but the hospital comes here." He turned to Tarek. "I want a fully equipped ICU room built in the West Wing, top of the line, dialysis machine, a transport-ready ECMO circuit on standby, everything doctor. Merrick could possibly need. Get it done. Yesterday." He then looked back at me. "You will have your controlled environment, doctor, right here." I was stunned by the sheer force of his will, the casual way he commanded resources that would take a hospital months to procure. While his team began the process of turning a wing of the estate into a medical facility, I started working on a new treatment protocol for Morella, using the emergency supply of verified medications from my own bag. As I sat at a makeshift desk, inputting the new dosages into her digital chart, my personal phone, retrieved from the Faraday box, buzzed. It was an encrypted message from an unknown number, just a single, chilling line of text. "Stop digging into Harborgate Logistics." I stared at the name. Harborgate Logistics. It meant nothing to me. Before I could even process the threat. Cashin's phone rang. He answered, his conversation consisting of a series of monosyllabic grunts. When he hung up, his face was carved from ice. He walked over to where I was sitting and looked down at me, his shadow falling over the desk. "Harborgate Logistics," he said, his voice a low growl. One of our shipping contractors. Their primary warehouse on the south side just went up in flames. A gas leak. They're saying. He held my gaze, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his formidable composure. It was a look of cold, calculating rage. You just kicked the anthill, Doctor. The world suddenly felt smaller, the walls of the mansion closing in. My investigation was no longer just about medical malpractice. I had stumbled into the middle of a war, and Cassian's enemies were now mine. Later that day, while Morella was sleeping, I found a moment to speak with her private nurse, a kind, competent woman named Juniper Klein, June, as she insisted I call her, had been with Morella for years and was fiercely loyal. I explained my concerns about the medication, carefully omitting the more dangerous details. June's face paled. She wrung her hands, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. I knew something wasn't right, she whispered, her voice trembling. A few times, late at night, I've seen deliveries. They weren't from our usual medical supplier. A different truck. Different people. Once, I saw one of the men swap out several cases of medication with new ones. He had an internal guest pass. I thought it was strange, but who was I to question it? Her words confirmed it. The supply chain was being compromised from within. The threat wasn't just external. There was a traitor inside the Riva organization. The feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking my every move, intensified. When I returned to Northstead the next day to arrange for the new equipment, the feeling followed me. My office felt different, the air heavy, on a hunch. I asked hospital security to pull the camera footage from the hallway outside my door. There it was, a 1-minute gap in the recording from the previous evening. At precisely 8:14 p.m., I cross-referenced it with the hospital's IT logs. At that exact time, Morella Riva's electronic medical record, a file that didn't officially exist and was buried under layers of privacy protocols, had been accessed using a high-level administrative login that wasn't mine. Someone inside my own hospital was part of this. They were monitoring my patient, and now they were monitoring me. The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying picture. A sophisticated counterfeit drug operation, using a company like Harborgate Logistics as a front, had managed to infiltrate not only the Riva consortium, but a major medical institution. An operation this complex would need protection, someone to erase paper trails and redirect investigations, someone like a compromised official inside a body like the Interstate Financial Crimes Office. That night, back at the estate, the new ICU wing was already taking shape, a whirlwind of construction and installation. I found Cassian standing in the framework of the new room, watching the flurry of activity. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with the ghosts of who we used to be and the monsters we were now facing. "They're inside the hospital," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're watching me." He didn't seem surprised. He just nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the sterile white walls going up. "I know." He turned to face me, the dim construction lights casting long shadows across his face. "This is bigger than a few bad batches of medicine. This is an attack on my family, using my mother as a pawn." "So what do we do?" I asked. He took a step closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His stormy eyes locked onto mine, and the coldness was gone, replaced by a raw, burning intensity. "We make a deal," he said, his voice low and firm. "You are the only doctor I trust. You will save my mother. You will use real medicine, real science, and you will not let her die." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "And I will take care of the rest. I will find the rats selling the poison, the ones in my organization and the ones in yours, and I will burn their world to the ground." The air crackled. The 16-year-old girl inside me was screaming, lost in the depths of his dangerous promise. But the doctor, the woman I had become, saw the only path forward. It was a pact with a devil, but he was the only devil on my side. In that moment, as our eyes met, a spark arced across the divide. It wasn't the sweet, innocent flame from a decade ago. This was different. It was the friction of two desperate people forging an alliance in the dark. Trust was the rarest medicine of all, and we were both in desperately short supply. The Northstead annual charity gala was a world away from the hushed, life-or-death tension of the Ridgecrest estate. Here, the beeping of heart monitors was replaced by the clinking of champagne glasses, the scent of antiseptic supplanted by a cloud of expensive perfumes. It was a glittering, polished universe of performative philanthropy, and I felt like an alien visitor. The plum-colored silk dress I wore felt like a costume, elegant and foreign against my skin. The only thing that felt real was the tiny, cold disc of the microphone Tarek had given me, secured beneath the fabric over my heart. It was my secret purpose, a direct link to a man in a van parked 3 blocks away, listening to every lie. Our target was Dr. Nolan Cade, Northstead's chief operating officer, to the city of Ashbrook. He was a hero, the man who had tripled the hospital's endowment and brought cutting-edge technology to our halls. He moved through the crowd with the easy grace of a politician, his smile as bright and sterile as a surgical suite. He was shaking hands with the mayor, laughing with a senator. To me, he was a ghost, a name whispered in a back room, a potential architect of Morella Riva's slow demise. My mission tonight was to give that ghost a voice, to capture a single thread of conversation that would tie the celebrated Dr. Cade to the phantom company known as Harbor Gate Logistics. Then Cassian arrived. He didn't make a grand entrance. He simply appeared, a figure of quiet intensity in the vibrant chaos. He was dressed not in the black armor of the estate, but in a charcoal gray suit that screamed old money and legitimacy. On his arm was an impeccably dressed woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, who I later learned was Maya Lorne, his lead counsel. He was playing the part of Cassian Riva, the reclusive CEO of a diversified investment group. He moved with a purpose that was entirely different from Cade's glad-handing. He was observing, assessing, a predator in a room full of peacocks. He didn't approach me. Our pact demanded distance, but I felt his gaze on me throughout the night, a tangible pressure on my skin. It was a silent, constant communication, a look across the room that said, "Are you all right?" Another that asked, "Have you heard anything?" My subtle shake of the head, a slight turn of my shoulder. We were 2 spies speaking a language no one else in the room could understand. The main event was Cade's speech. He took the stage to thunderous applause, his charisma filling the grand ballroom. He spoke of progress, of community, of the lives we were saving. He was flawless. He detailed our new acquisitions, our improved patient outcomes. Then he got to logistics, boasting about our new, streamlined inventory system. "Thanks to our efficiency overhaul," he said, his voice resonating with pride, "we've reduced our on-site pharmaceutical surplus by 30%, and our spoilage and return figures, which we report to the FDA, are the lowest in the state. We're running a leaner, more effective operation than ever before." The donors applauded wildly. My blood went cold. I knew those numbers. A hospital like Northstead, especially a cardiac center that uses highly sensitive, temperature-controlled drugs, has a standard. Predictable rate of spoilage and return. Reducing it by 30% wasn't just lean. It was statistically impossible without either a miracle or a lie. He was bragging about a number that could only be achieved if a significant portion of the drug inventory wasn't actually going to patients, or if the drugs being logged weren't the ones being shipped. He was hiding the counterfeit pipeline in plain sight, laundering it through efficiency metrics. Tarek would have it all on tape. A short time later, a waitress with a familiar, determined set to her job brushed past my table, pretending to stumble. A tray of empty glasses clattered. It was June. As she bent to pick them up, she pressed a folded napkin into my hand and whispered, "Pharmacy loading bay. Done." I palmed the napkin and nodded, my heart hammering. She had completed her own dangerous mission. I excused myself and went to the powder room. Unfolding the napkin, I saw a grainy cell phone picture of a QR code on a shipping manifest. next to a box with the Harbor Gate Logistics logo. Below it, June had scribbled a note rerouted, Baymore, Dock 7. The counterfeit drugs weren't just in the city, they were coming in through the port. As I stepped back into the ballroom, my own phone vibrated in my clutch. A text from a secure number Cassian had given me. It was one word, Morello. Vega Morello, a name I knew only from hushed, fearful mentions on the late-night news, Cassian's most dangerous rival. The text was a puzzle piece snapping into place. Morello was backing Harbor Gate. This wasn't just about money. It was a strategic move in a larger war. Vega Morello needed Morella to remain weak, a point of leverage to force Cassian's hand, to make him sign some treaty that would cost him territory or power. My patient's life was a bargaining chip. Feeling suffocated by the crowd and the weight of it all, I slipped out onto a deserted stone balcony. The cold night air was a welcome shock. The city lights of Ashbrook spread out below like a carpet of scattered diamonds. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear him approach. "He's a good liar," Cassian's low voice said, startling me. He came to stand beside me at the balustrade, not looking at me, but out at the city. A photographer inside the ballroom raised a camera, the long lens pointing in our direction, in a single fluid motion. Cassian stepped in front of me, his body shielding mine from the shot. He was so close I could feel the warmth of him through the thin silk of my dress. Smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne mixed with the cold night air. His breath was warm against my temple as he spoke, his voice a murmur meant only for me. They're watching us. The proximity was dizzying. It dissolved the years, broke down the walls. My pulse, which had been racing with adrenaline, now thrummed with a different, more dangerous rhythm. The memory of a boy's clumsy kiss under a bruised sky crashed into the reality of the powerful, lethal man standing beside me. "This is not my world, Cassian," I whispered, my voice tight. "I'm a doctor. I don't cover for violence. I only choose the patient." He turned his head slightly, his stormy eyes meeting mine in the dim light. "So do I," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't hide. "My mother." The raw truth of his words hung between us, a fragile bridge over a chasm of secrets. It was then that the glass door slid open. "Doctor." Nolan Cade stepped out, his hero's smile firmly in place. Doctor. Merrick," he said, his tone impossibly pleasant. "Getting some air, it can be a bit much in there." He glanced at Cassian, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before focusing back on me. "I just wanted to say how much we appreciate your dedication. You've been putting in incredible hours." He took a small step closer, his smile never wavering, but his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But you must be careful. This is a very big, very complex industry. You wouldn't want to find yourself swimming in industrial waters you don't understand." It was a threat, delivered with the smooth precision of a scalpel. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted inside the ballroom. Shouts, confusion. A uniformed officer from the Ashbrook Metropolitan Bureau was at the microphone, announcing a surprise security check. My heart leaped into my throat, but Cassian's hand found my elbow, a steady, grounding pressure. "Watch," he murmured. We saw them, a team of officers, moving with theatrical purpose toward a server room on the opposite side of the ballroom. It was a performance. I knew from Tarek's intel that the relevant servers were in the West Wing, not the East. They were putting on a show, a raid designed to look good while deliberately missing its target. It was a clear signal the local authorities were compromised. Another pawn on Vega Morello's board. "Time to go," Cassian said, his grip firm. He didn't lead me back through the ballroom. Instead, he pulled me toward a heavy service door at the end of the balcony. He pushed it open into a dark, narrow corridor that smelled of disinfectant and cooking grease. The sounds of the gala faded behind us, replaced by the hum of kitchen ventilators. He didn't let go of my arm. He navigated the labyrinth of stainless steel and stacked crates, pulling me along in his wake in the dim, flickering light, our hurried footsteps echoing off the tiled walls. He finally took my hand. His grasp was strong. Sure, it wasn't the tentative touch of the boy I remembered. It was the anchor of a man pulling me from a storm. For that one brief moment, as we ran through the shadows beneath the glittering party, our heartbeats were in sync, a frantic, shared rhythm of survival. We emerged into a back alley, the cold air hitting us again. His driver was there, the ash-gray sedan idling silently. He opened the door for me, and just as I was about to get in, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and I saw his face tighten, the cold mask of control slipping back into place. He looked at me, his eyes dark with a new, terrible urgency. "That was June," he said, his voice flat and hard. "The new shipment of verified medication for my mother, the one you ordered from Northstead's Secure Supply. It's just been indefinitely detained at the port of Baymore. An anonymous tip led to a routine customs inspection." The small victory we'd just achieved vanished. They hadn't just been one step ahead of us. They had been three. They had cut off my patient's lifeline. The game had changed, and the clock on Morella Riva's life was ticking faster than ever. The gala dress was a ghost, a silk and sequin memory discarded in the back of Cassian's car. I was back in practical, dark clothing, the sensible attire of a doctor on a very, very unusual house call. But we weren't at a house. We were in Baymore, the industrial heart of the city, a place of rust and shadows where the skeletal arms of cranes clawed at a black, rain-swept sky. The rain wasn't falling, it was being driven, a furious horizontal assault that turned the windshield into a warped, streaming lens. I was in the passenger seat of a black SUV, part of a 3-car convoy that moved without lights. Silent predators in the downpour. Tarek was at the wheel, his focus absolute, his hands steady. Cassian sat in the back, a silent, coiled presence, his voice a low murmur in his earpiece as he coordinated the trap. My role in this was specific. In my lap, nestled in a shockproof case, was the portable spectrophotometer I'd borrowed from the Northstead Research Lab. I wasn't here to heal. I was here to analyze, to be the scientific witness to a crime in progress. My heart hammered against my ribs in a rhythm that matched the frantic beat of the windshield wipers. This was his world, a universe of shadows and violence, and I was a tourist with a one-way ticket. Tarek's voice was calm. "Target is mobile, eastbound from the secondary depot." Ahead of us, a large Harbor Gate logistics truck lumbered out of an unmarked warehouse, its headlights cutting feeble paths through the deluge. Our convoy fell in behind it, a shadow it didn't know it had. We followed it into the sprawling labyrinth of the shipping yard, a steel canyon of stacked containers. The ship horns wailed from the unseen water, mournful cries of giant beasts. The trap was sprung with brutal efficiency. Our lead car swerved, blocking the truck's path. The third car boxed it in from behind. Men in dark tactical gear emerged from our vehicles, weapons held low and ready. Tarek was out in a flash, a silhouette against the rain. "Stay in the car," Cassian commanded as he opened his door. "The analysis needs to be done on site," I argued, grabbing the spectrometer case. "We need to know what we're dealing with." His jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. "Stay behind me." He led me toward the back of the captured truck, his broad frame a shield against the wind and rain. Tarek's men had the driver and his passenger out of the cab. Faces down on the wet asphalt, they pried open the container doors with a loud groan of metal. Inside, stacked on pallets, were hundreds of cardboard boxes, all bearing the pristine branding of Northstead's pharmaceutical supplier. The seals looked perfect, the logos crisp. I climbed into the container, the smell of damp cardboard and deceit filling my lungs. I took out the spectrometer, my fingers numb with cold and adrenaline. I sliced open a box, pulled out a vial of sacubitril valsartan, and drew a sample. The device hummed. A few seconds later, the result glowed on the screen, 58% concentration. A lethal lie in a perfect package. "It's fake," I said, turning to Cassian. "All of it." That's when the world exploded in light. Headlights from a dozen directions flared to life, pinning us in a blinding glare. Men seemed to rise from between the containers, materializing from the shadows. Vega Morello's men. The metallic clatter of weapons being readied echoed off the steel walls around us. "Lila, get back," Cassian yelled, shoving me behind him as the first shots rang out. The night erupted into a symphony of chaos, gunshots sharp and deafening. The ping and shriek of bullets ricocheting off the containers. Men shouting. It was surreal, a scene from a movie. But the smell of cordite was real. The tremor of impact through the soles of my shoes was real. Tarek and his team were outnumbered but not outmaneuvered, returning fire with disciplined precision, using the containers for cover. Cassian pushed me toward the relative safety of the open container doors, his body a solid wall. "We have to move!" he shouted over the din. In the strobing chaos of muzzle flashes, I saw him a dock worker, caught in the crossfire, his leg pinned beneath a heavy wooden pallet that had been knocked over in the initial ambush. He was screaming, his voice lost in the cacophony. My instincts took over. The doctor in me saw a patient, not a bystander. Before Cassian could stop me, I darted away from his protection, scrambling toward the injured man. "Lila!" Cassian's roar was filled with fury and fear. I reached the worker, the rain plastering my hair to my face. "I'm a doctor," I yelled, trying to assess the injury. The pallet was crushing his lower leg. I tried to lift it, my muscles straining uselessly against the dead weight. Suddenly, Cassian was there, his face a mask of grim determination. He didn't waste a word, simply put his shoulder under the edge of the pallet and heaved. The wood groaned and lifted just enough for me to drag the man's leg free. A bullet slammed into the steel wall just inches from my head, the impact a violent thud that I felt in my bones. Without thinking, Cassian threw himself over me, his body covering mine, pressing me down against the wet ground. For a second, the world was nothing but the hard ground beneath me, the solid weight of him above me, and the thunder of his heart against my back. "We go now," Tarek's voice cut through the noise. Cassian hauled me to my feet, his hand clamped around my wrist. We ran, weaving through the maze of steel boxes, the sounds of the firefight chasing us. Our escape vehicle, an SUV, screeched to a halt at the end of an aisle. Tarek was in the driver's seat, laying down cover fire. Cassian practically threw me into the back seat and dove in after me, slamming the door shut as bullets sparked against the armored plating. The vehicle lurched forward, tires screaming on the slick pavement, and plunged back into the darkness. We careened through the yard, finally breaking through a chain-link fence and onto an old set of service rails that ran parallel to the main road. I was gasping for breath, adrenaline singing in my veins. Cassian was practically on top of me in the cramped back seat, his arm still protectively around my shoulders. The professional distance, the years of separation. The ghosts of our past, they had all been burned away in the firefight. In that moment, there was only the raw, undeniable reality of our bodies pressed together, of his breath hot against my cheek, of the shared, frantic pulse of survival. We rendezvoused with the rest of his surviving team at a disused warehouse miles away. Tarek, his face grim, made his report. We lost the truck, but we got what we needed. He held up a small, mud-spattered object, a magnetic disc. GPS tracker. We found it fastened under the chassis. It's not standard for their fleet. Back in the relative safety of the SUV, a laptop glowed. The signal from the tracker was strong. It didn't lead to a warehouse or a known Morello safe house. It led to a bank account, a charitable foundation. The Heartline Foundation, a well-known philanthropic organization, heavily funded by donors from the gala. It was the hospital's largest charitable partner. The snake was eating its own tail. "They're using a charity as a cutout to finance the operation," Cassian said, his voice dangerously quiet. He turned to me, his eyes dark with concern. "This is too close now. Lila, Morello knows you're with me. He knows you're a threat. I want to move you to the penthouse at the Riva Tower. No one can get to you there." The offer was a cage, gilded and secure. "I won't be your prisoner, Cassian. I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I won't be locked away." I saw a flicker of frustration in his eyes, but he nodded, accepting my boundary. "Fine. But June isn't safe at her apartment anymore. Tarek will find a secure place for her, a place no one knows." I agreed immediately. June was in this because of me. I had to protect her. Later, as the first hints of a gray dawn broke over the city, Tarek approached Cassian with a tablet. "I did a deep dive on the Northstead server logs," he said. "The unauthorized access to your mother's file wasn't the only anomaly. I checked internal access logs for the main pharmaceutical storeroom. There was a manual override entry at 3:12 a.m. 2 nights ago, just before a major shipment was rerouted." "Who?" Cassian asked. The ID code was PV. Cassian's face hardened, the lines around his mouth deepening. He didn't need to ask. The name came to him instantly. "Paloma Viscari." He said the name like a curse. "My deputy head of finance." The traitor wasn't just in the hospital. She was at the heart of his own empire. He looked like he was ready to start a war, but I saw another way. "Don't go after them with guns, Cassian," I said, my voice finding its strength. "That's their game. We'll lose. We need to attack them where they're vulnerable." He looked at me, skepticism in his eyes. "We attack them softly," I explained, leaning forward. "We use their own system against them. The Heartline Foundation, it's a charity. It has to file paperwork, invoices, grant requests. Let's follow the money, not the guns. We trace every dollar from Heartline to Harborgate. We expose Cade and his entire network through a paper trail he can't make disappear." For a long moment, he just looked at me, the strategist behind his eyes evaluating the doctor in front of him. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. Just then, my phone, which I'd left on the console, buzzed. I picked it up, a new message from an unknown number. There was an attachment. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was a photograph, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It was of me and Cassian on the balcony at the gala. Him, shielding me, his face close to mine. A moment of intense, stolen intimacy. It was damning. It was dangerous. And beneath the picture, a single line of text. "Choose your medicine or him." The morning after the firefight felt like a dream. The world outside the Ridgecrest Estate's walls was still a place of threats and shadows. But within the sun-drenched glass of Morella's private orangery, there was a fragile peace. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of citrus blossoms. I was checking Morella's vitals, the quiet beeps of the portable monitor, a gentle counterpoint to the chirping of birds outside. She was weak, her breathing shallow, but her eyes were clear. "He was always saving up for something. My Cassian," she said, her voice a soft, papery rustle. I looked up from my chart. She was staring at a point in the middle distance. Lost in a memory. When he was 16, it was a camera, a fancy one. He worked all summer at the docks, hauling crates to buy it. She turned her head on the pillow, her gaze finding mine. He told me it was for a girl with eyes the color of a summer sky, who saw the world in a way he wanted to capture forever. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered that summer. I remembered him talking about photography, about wanting to show me the beauty he saw in the gritty, industrial corners of Ashbrook. I never knew he was saving for a camera. For me. "He lost her," Morella continued, a profound sadness in her voice. "The world took him, and he lost her." The weight of that loss, of a future that had been erased, settled heavily in the warm air. To distract myself, to ground myself in the solid certainty of medicine, I wheeled the portable ultrasound machine closer to her bed. "I'd like to do another echocardiogram, Morella, just to see how your heart is responding to the new medication." She nodded, her hand fluttering on the silk sheet. I went through the familiar motions, applying the cold gel to her chest, pressing the transducer probe against her skin. The black and white images bloomed on the screen, a ghostly, pulsing map of her failing heart. I measured the chambers, analyzed the muscle movement, and then I saw it. I switched to the colored Doppler function, and a vivid jet of turbulent, multicolored flow confirmed my fear. The regurgitation, the backward leak of blood through her mitral valve, was worse, significantly worse. The counterfeit drugs had done more damage than I'd realized, weakening the delicate structures of her heart, perhaps irreparably. The murmur I'd heard wasn't just a symptom, it was the sound of her life slipping away. I kept my face neutral, but my heart sank. Morella seemed to sense the shift in my mood. Her frail fingers found my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Don't hide it from me. Lila, I'm a mother. I know when something is wrong." She looked deep into my eyes, her own filled with a weary wisdom. "My son," she whispered. "He thinks power can protect the ones he loves. He builds walls of money and fear, thinking they will keep the world out. He's wrong. Power doesn't protect love. It isolates it." She reached for a worn leather photo album on her bedside table and pushed it toward me. "Look, in the back." Tucked into a pocket behind the last plastic-sleeved page was a single, folded piece of notebook paper, yellowed with age. It was a letter. I recognized the sharp, angular handwriting immediately. It was Cassian's. He had written it to me. He'd asked a friend to deliver it the week after he disappeared. The friend had given it to my father, who, in his own misguided attempt to protect me from the Riva family's troubles, had never passed it on. He'd confessed it to me years later, an act of parental guilt. I had never seen the letter itself, until now. My hands trembled as I read the words of a 16-year-old boy, his heart torn open. He wrote of an impossible situation, of a blood agreement his father had made, a debt that had come due. He wrote that to save his family. He had to become someone else, to walk a path where I couldn't follow. He begged me not to hate him and promised he would never forget me. He ended the letter with a single, heartbreaking line: "You were the only real thing in my life." A single tear escaped and splashed onto the brittle paper. The anger I had nursed for 16 years, the righteous fury of a girl who felt abandoned and discarded, crumbled, leaving behind only a profound, hollow ache. It wasn't a choice to leave me. It was a sentence he had been forced to serve. "I found it in his room after he left," Morella said softly. "I knew he would want you to have it someday." I was still holding the letter when the door opened and Cassian walked in. He stopped short when he saw the letter in my hands. The look on my face. The carefully constructed walls of the ruthless crime boss fell away, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the 16-year-old boy, vulnerable and exposed. He didn't wait for me to speak. He walked over, his eyes never leaving mine, and finally gave voice to the truth that had been a ghost between us for over a decade. He told me about the night he vanished, how his father's enemies had cornered them, how a deal had been struck to spare their lives in exchange for allegiance. The price for his family's safety was him. He was pulled into the darkness, forbidden from all contact with his old life, every connection severed to protect me from being used as leverage against him. He was a ghost by necessity. I listened, the words washing over me, filling in the vast, empty spaces of the past. When he finished, the silence in the room was heavy with the weight of lost years. I was still angry. Angry at the world that had done this to him. Angry at the secrets, at the life that had been stolen from us. But the anger was now intertwined with a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow. "From this moment on," I said, my voice low but steady, my gaze locking with his, "no more secrets, not from me. If we are going to do this, if I am going to save your mother, I need the truth, all of it." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a new foundation, a fragile one, built on the rubble of the past. He gave a single, solemn nod. No more secrets. The moment of raw honesty was shattered by the arrival of a woman whose presence felt like a drop of ice water on a hot day. Paloma Vescari. She was beautiful, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. Her movements fluid and confident. She smiled, but it was a predator's smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Cassian," she said, her voice like smooth silk, I have those preliminary statements you asked for." She handed him a tablet, her eyes flicking to me for a brief, dismissive moment. "It seems our friends at the Heartline Foundation have been funding a private research lab in the South very generously." She was playing the part of the loyal deputy, feeding him the information I had asked for, positioning herself as an ally. But her eyes were cold, calculating chips of glass. As Cassian took the tablet, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from June. "Lila, alert. Morella's file was just remotely accessed from a Northstead terminal. The login credentials used were yours. It was active for 30 seconds. It happened 2 minutes ago." I looked at my watch. 2 minutes ago. I was right here, in the orangery, holding an ultrasound probe. I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They were framing me, using my credentials to access a hidden file, creating a digital breadcrumb trail that led directly to me. They were building a case, painting me as a co-conspirator, a doctor who had sold her ethics for a crime family. I showed the text to Cassian. He read it, and a look of pure, cold fury settled on his face. He immediately got on the phone to Tarek. Lock down all remote access to my mother's file, effective immediately, and find out who was at that terminal." But we both knew the damage was done. The electronic footprint was there, an indelible stain on my professional record. Suddenly, Morella gasped, her hand flying to her chest. A series of harsh, ragged coughs shook her frail body. Her monitor blared, oxygen saturation levels plummeting. The peaceful morning shattered. I was instantly in doctor mode, raising the head of the bed, grabbing a non-rebreather mask, flooding her lungs with oxygen. Cassian was at her other side, his face pale with fear, holding her hand. Amid the chaos, as she fought for every breath, Morella's eyes found mine. Then she looked at her son. Her words were a strained, desperate whisper, spoken between ragged gasps. "The two of you, don't let this work. Kill your love again." Her words hit me harder than any bullet. This work, the secrets, the violence, the constant threat, it had killed what we had once before, and it was threatening to do it all over again. Once Morella was stable, a new resolve hardened within me. They wanted to use my profession against me. I would turn it into a fortress. "June," I said, my voice sharp and clear. "From now on, we document everything. Every single vial of medication that comes into this room is to be logged. Every infusion is to be videotaped with a timestamp. We are creating an evidence trail that no one can dispute." I turned to Cassian. "And I'm changing her protocol. We're switching to a combination of medications that are newer, more complex, and come in formulations that are much harder to counterfeit." I left the new ICU wing and headed for the main house elevator to go down to the temporary office they had set up for me. Cassian followed me, his silence a heavy presence at my back. We stepped into the elevator, the polished steel doors closing us into the small, quiet space. The car began its smooth descent. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall, a tired, drawn woman who looked nothing like the girl who had received a letter from a boy 16 years ago. Then, with a soft jolt, the elevator stopped. I looked at Cassian. His hand was pressed against the emergency stop button. The silence in the small car was absolute. He turned to face me, his stormy eyes filled with a raw, aching vulnerability I had not seen since he was a boy. The space between us felt charged. Every unspoken word, every lost year, compressed into a single, unbearable moment. "Lila," he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. "I don't want you to leave this elevator without knowing." He took a half step closer, his gaze holding mine captive. I never stopped. The doors slid open with a soft, electronic chime, revealing the brightly lit hallway. The moment was broken. The words were left hanging in the air, a promise and a torment, unfinished. The summons came not as a polite request, but as a quiet, unyielding order. 2 plainclothed detectives from the Ashbrook Metropolitan Bureau met me at the hospital, their expressions carefully neutral, their presence an invasive species in my sterile world of medicine. They informed me I was required for questioning in a matter concerning the mishandling of institutional pharmaceutical funds. The accusation was so ludicrous, so surgically precise in its falsehood, that I felt a strange sense of calm. The game had moved to a new board. The interrogation room was a beige box designed to make you feel small and insignificant. I sat at a metal table, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and refused the offer of water. I wasn't alone. Maya Lorne, Cashin's lawyer, sat beside me, her composure as sharp and unbreachable as a fortress wall. She had intercepted the detectives, her presence non-negotiable. The lead detective, a man named Chen, laid out the evidence. My login credentials had been used to access and reroute a budget allocation for a specific set of cardiac drugs. It was a neat, tidy fabrication. I was nowhere near a hospital terminal at the time of the alleged transaction, I stated, my voice even. I was at a private residence, attending to a patient. A patient whose identity is sealed? Chen asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Before I could answer, Maya slid a tablet across the table. You'll find here, Detective, the server logs from Northstead's West Wing IT hub, time-stamped and verified by a third-party cybersecurity firm. They show that, Doctor. Merrick's terminal was inactive and her account was accessed via a remote administrative override from a different subnet entirely. An override that was then digitally scrubbed, but not before our client's system caught a mirror image of the intrusion. Chen's professional calm faltered. He was looking at evidence that dismantled his entire case. But just as a flicker of victory ignited in my chest, the door opened. 2 new figures entered, a man and a woman, their suits a sharper cut, their demeanor colder. Detectives, the woman said, flashing a badge. Agents Thorne and Davies, Interstate Financial Crimes Office. This is now a federal matter. IFCU, the compromised agency. My blood ran cold. We're not interested in the hospital's accounting, Detective, Agent Thorne said, his eyes locking onto me. We're interested in Dr. Merrick's documented association with known organized crime figure, Cassian Riva. He dropped a file on the table. It slapped against the metal with a sound of finality. Inside was the photo from the gala, me and Cassian on the balcony. Given the active investigation into Mr. Riva's financial enterprises, we believe, Doctor, Merrick is a material witness and potentially an accessory. We're placing her in protective custody, pending a formal inquiry. This was the trap. It was never about the drug funds. That was just the bait. The real goal was to sever me from Cassian, to isolate me, to either turn me against him or bury me in a legal black hole where I could no longer help his mother. Maya began to object, citing jurisdiction and lack of a warrant, but the federal agents were immovable. They were going to take me. Then, Maya's tablet chimed. She looked at it and a small, confident smile touched her lips. Agents, she said, turning the screen toward them. Before you go to the trouble, you might want to review this. On the screen was a live, high-definition video feed. It split into 4 quadrants, showing a bedroom, a hallway, a garden, and a kitchen. In the corner of each quadrant was a precise, running time code. This is the live feed from the Riva Estate's internal security, Maya explained calmly. As you can see, it is quite comprehensive. Now, if you'll direct your attention to this archived file. She tapped the screen. A new video appeared. It was time-stamped for the exact moment my credentials had been used at the hospital. And there I was, clear as day, in Morella's ICU wing, administering an infusion, with June Klein standing right beside me. As you can see, Doctor, Merrick was performing her medical duties at the time of the alleged crime. Any attempt to detain her based on that fabricated premise will be met with a rather aggressive lawsuit for wrongful arrest and harassment. A lawsuit, I might add. That will make Mr. Riva's extensive security records a matter of public discovery. The agents stared at the screen, their faces hardening. They had been outmaneuvered. Cassian hadn't used force. He'd used something far more powerful, the truth, captured in unshakable detail. He had turned his fortress of a home into my alibi. Just as the agents were forced to back down, the door opened again. "Doctor." Nolan Cade swept in, his face a mask of deep concern. "Lila, my God, I just heard, this is an outrage." He played the part of the heroic COO perfectly. He spoke in low, authoritative tones to the detectives and the federal agents, mentioning his connections, the hospital's legal team. It was a masterful performance. Within minutes, he had signed some paperwork, effectively vouching for me, and the cloud of menace dissipated. He walked me out, his hand on my elbow in a gesture of paternalistic protection. "I'm so sorry you were put through that, Lila," he said as we stood on the cold stone steps of the bureau. "There are powerful forces at play. You're a brilliant doctor. It would be a tragedy to see your career derailed by unfortunate associations." He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "My advice: stick to medicine. Let the Heartline Foundation's work be handled by the administrators. Just focus on your patients." The threat was clear, wrapped in the velvet glove of concern. The ride back to the estate was silent. My mind was a whirlwind of rage, fear, and a strange, overwhelming sense of gratitude. When we arrived, Tarek met us at the door. He spoke to Cassian in a low voice, but I heard the key phrases: burner phone, prepaid, a wire transfer to an account held by Agent Thorne's brother-in-law, authorized by a shell corporation owned by Vega Morello. All the pieces were connected. Cade, Morello, IFCO, a triangle of corruption with my life and Morella's caught in the middle. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself in the vast, silent kitchen of the main house, the moonlight painting silver rectangles on the black marble floor. I was staring out at the dark, manicured lawns, my reflection a pale ghost in the glass. When I heard footsteps, it was Cassian. He didn't say anything, just came and stood beside me, his presence filling the cavernous room. The silence stretched, thick with everything that had happened, with everything left unsaid in the elevator. "Thank you," I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. "For today, you saved me." "They came after you because of me," he said, his voice a low growl of self-recrimination. "I put you in that room." "I walked in with my own 2 feet, I countered, turning to face him. "We made a deal, remember?" The anger, the gratitude, the bone-deep weariness, and a terrifying, undeniable current of desire swirled between us. The 16 years of silence, the firefight, the interrogation, it had all been a crucible, burning away everything but the raw, essential truth that connected us. He reached out, his fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. The touch was electric, a spark in the darkness. "The last thing I ever wanted was to bring this world to your door," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's too late for that," I whispered. "It's already inside." The unspoken words from the elevator hung in the air between us. He looked at me, his stormy eyes asking a question he wouldn't voice. I gave him the answer. I closed the small distance between us and rose on my toes, my hand coming up to cup the back of his neck, and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a release of all the pent-up fear and fury and longing. It was the desperate gasp of air after being held underwater for too long. His arms came around me, pulling me tight against him, his kiss answering mine with a fierce, possessive hunger that stole my breath. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against each other. "Lila," he breathed, his voice unsteady. "Are you sure?" It was a question, a plea for consent, a clear and unambiguous offering of a choice. I didn't answer with words. I answered by tightening my grip, my fingers tracing the hard line of his jaw and guiding his mouth back to mine. This time, the kiss was different. Slower, deeper. It was a conversation, a mapping of old scars and new territory. The touch of our hands became an exploration, hesitant at first, then more certain, a language of trembling fingers and steadying palms. There was no rush, Each layer of clothing removed was like shedding a piece of the past, a layer of armor, until it was just us, just skin against skin, a shiver of vulnerability and a jolt of certainty. In the cool, moonlit kitchen, the world of guns and conspiracies fell away, and there was only this. He kept murmuring my name, asking if I was okay. His concern a stark contrast to the world he inhabited. I would answer by squeezing his hand, by guiding his touch, by showing him that this was not a surrender, but a declaration, a choice. My choice. The imagined camera of my memory focused on the intensity in his eyes, on the frantic, synchronized rhythm of our heartbeats, on the sound of my own voice whispering, "Don't leave me," before the world faded to a soft, warm black. I woke to the pale light of dawn filtering into a room I didn't recognize. I was in Cassian's bed, tangled in warm sheets, his arm slung protectively over my waist. There were no regrets. There was no awkwardness. The night had not been an ending, but a beginning. It had forged our alliance into something stronger, something more real. He was already awake, watching me, his expression soft in the morning light. I spoke first, my voice clear and steady. "We save your mother, and we cut the head off the snake. We sever Heartline's money trail, and we expose Cade for what he is." A slow smile spread across his face. It was the first genuine smile I had seen from him since we were 16. He didn't answer with promises. He answered with action. Leaned over, picked up a sleek, encrypted laptop from his nightstand, and opened it on the bed between us. "No more secrets," he said. He turned the screen to me. It was a dizzying flowchart of corporations, holding companies, and offshore accounts. He walked me through it all. The legitimate shipping businesses, the real estate holdings, and the gray, shadowy areas that financed his power. He was showing me his entire world, the light and the dark. It was the most profound act of trust he could offer. He was giving me the blueprint to his kingdom. Later that morning, as I was leaving his private wing to go check on Morella, I saw her. Paloma Viscari was standing down the hall, speaking with one of the security staff. She saw me emerge from Cassian's room. She saw the way he followed me out, the way his hand rested on my arm for a moment too long. I saw the flicker in her eyes. The professional mask dropped for a fraction of a second, revealing the raw, corrosive jealousy beneath. It was a look of cold, calculating hatred. In that instant, I knew. Her betrayal wasn't just business, it was personal. And a woman scorned in a world like this was a threat more dangerous than any assassin. The morning after, the world had shifted. The intimacy I had shared with Cassian was not a soft, romantic haze. It was a sharpening of the senses, a clarifying of the stakes. We were no longer just a doctor and a patient's son bound by circumstance. We were partners. Lying in his bed, with the blueprint of his empire still glowing on the laptop between us, I laid out the first move in our new war. "We cut the circuit," I said, my voice clear and certain in the quiet room. "Cade, Morello, Heartline. They've created a closed loop where money and medicine flow invisibly. We have to break it, not with a sledgehammer, but with a scalpel." Cassian listened, his focus absolute. "How?" "First, your mother's medication," I explained, my mind already working like a diagnostician mapping a disease. "We can't trust Northstead's supply chain as long as Cade is COO. I know a small, independent compounding lab in the next county. They're meticulous. We'll source her new drug regimen from them directly, and for every batch they deliver, a second, identical sample goes to another lab for independent quality testing, a lab that will be funded by an anonymous grant." "From whom?" "From a new entity Maya will create," I said. "A shell foundation. Let's call it the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. It will be our unseen hand, creating the paper trail we need, a trail that leads away from you and points toward the truth." The plan was a series of precise, interlocking moves, a chess game played with data instead of guns. While I handled the medical front, Tarek took on the financial. He didn't plant a bug, he planted a beacon. Embedded within the magnetic ink of a Heartline fund transfer invoice was a microscopic RFID tag. He followed the paper document through its courier route to a downtown bank, and from there, the signal tracked the digital transfer. The money didn't go to a research lab. It bounced through 3 shell corporations before landing in an account belonging to a holding company owned by Vega Morello. The circuit was now visible. Meanwhile, our quiet warrior, June, played her part. During a high-level administrative meeting at Northstead, she accidentally left a water pitcher on a credenza near the boardroom table. Tucked into the base was a tiny microphone. The audio it captured was mostly bureaucratic jargon. But then came the gem. Another administrator was questioning the cost of the new inventory system. Doctor. Cade's voice was smooth, reassuring. "It's a necessary expense," he said. "When a major donor like the Heartline Foundation wants us to optimize our distribution channels for their charitable deliveries, we have to be flexible. Their generosity allows for a great deal of our other work. Optimize. Flexible. The coded language of corruption. Now on tape." Our counteroffensive triggered an immediate reaction. The IFGO, poked by Morello and Cade, officially reopened their investigation into me. But this time, Maya was ready. In a preliminary hearing, just as Agent Thorne began to outline his fabricated case, Maya presented her own evidence. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with clarity, "we have metadata extracted from the Northstead Hospital server logs. It proves conclusively that the administrative override used to frame my client was initiated from a workstation registered to the hospital's finance department, specifically to the office of a Miss Paloma Viscari." She presented the irrefutable digital fingerprint. Furthermore, the log entry was then altered 30 seconds later from the same terminal in an attempt to hide the user's identity. The net was closing on Paloma. She was smart enough to know that Cade and Morello would cut her loose without a second thought, leaving her to take the fall. That evening, she requested a meeting with Cassian. It was held in his stark, modern office, a room of glass and steel. I was there, a silent observer. She was cornered, her usual silken confidence replaced by a brittle, desperate edge. "They're going to sacrifice me, Cassian," she said, her voice tight. "You know they will." "You made your choice, Paloma," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "I can give you the man who runs it all," she said, her eyes pleading. "The one inside the hospital, the architect. I give you him. You give me a new life, a plane, a new name, and I disappear." "The name," Cassian said, his voice like chipping ice. Paloma took a deep breath. "It's not just some manager taking a cut. It's the man at the very top. He's been playing you and Vega against each other for months, using Heartline to wash Morello's money and using the counterfeit drugs to keep your mother weak, to keep you distracted and desperate." She looked him dead in the eye. "It's Dr. Nolan Cade." Even though I had suspected it, hearing the name spoken aloud solidified the monstrous reality. Cade, the city's hero, was the monster in the lab coat. Cassian's stillness was terrifying. I saw the impulse in him, the primal urge to unleash his soldiers, to drag Cade from his polished office and deliver the brutal justice of his world. I placed a hand on his arm, a small touch that made him flinch as if from a burn. He looked at me, the storm raging in his eyes. "No," I said softly, but with unyielding force. "Not like that. If you do that, you become him, a man who uses violence to get what he wants, to save your mother. We need 2 things Cade and Morello can't control: a real heart and the real law." My words seemed to tether him, to pull him back from the brink. The path I was offering was harder, slower, but it was the only one that led to a future where we weren't looking over our shoulders. Our next move was to officially get Morella on the national transplant list, with her new, accurate medical records documenting the severe valve damage. She was a clear priority candidate. I submitted the paperwork myself. Within 24 hours, it was flagged for an administrative review. Dr. Cade, in his capacity as COO, was using his bureaucratic power to slow-walk her case, burying her in red tape, buying himself time. His desperation made him sloppy. That evening, June was walking to her car in the hospital's underground garage. A man stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, blocking her path. He didn't say a word, just grabbed her arm. But Tarek, who'd been shadowing June since the gala, materialized from the darkness. The confrontation was brutally short. Tarek disarmed the man and incapacitated him with ruthless efficiency. The would-be attacker fled, but he left something behind his phone. On it was a single recent text message. It was a calendar invite for a secret meeting. The attendees, Nolan Cade and Vega Morello. That phone gave me an idea for a trap of my own. Cade was expecting a final, large shipment of the counterfeit drugs, the ones meant to look like high-potency sedatives to manage end-of-life care. He believed he was still in control. I used a voice modulator and a burner phone, and I called his private line, posing as a nervous logistics manager from Harborgate. "Doctor, Cade," I said, pitching my voice higher, adding a stutter. "We have the final Heartline consignment, the anxiolytics, but with the new Port Authority checks, my driver is refusing to unload without a signed authorization from the receiving party. He needs your signature on the manifest before it leaves the truck." There was a pause. "This is highly irregular," Cade's smooth voice replied. "I know, sir," I stammered, "but he's spooked. Without your signature, the whole shipment goes back, and it could be tied up for weeks." I heard him sigh with exasperation. The bait was taken. "Fine. Have him meet me at the south entrance in 10 minutes. I'll sign the damn thing." He was about to sign a confession, a direct link between himself and the counterfeit shipment. As our own plans were clicking into place, Paloma played her final card. In exchange for an accelerated escape, she gave Tarek the location of Cade's real insurance policy. It wasn't in a bank. It was in a place no one would think to look: the abandoned Seabright Aquarium down by the old shipyards. A derelict glass palace left to rot, in a climate-controlled safe in the old director's office. Cade kept a hard copy of everything: the real Heartline account ledgers, the shipping manifests from Harborgate, and his correspondence with Morello. It was the entire conspiracy in a single steel box. We had him. All the pieces were in place: the money trail, the incriminating audio, the signed manifest, and now the location of his entire unredacted history. But our enemy had one last move to make. That night, as the wind began to howl outside and the first sheets of rain from a coming nor'easter lashed against the windows, Cassian received a message. It was from Vega Morello. There was no greeting, no threat, just a statement of terms. "A storm is coming. By sunrise, the books will be settled. You will sign the Baymore Treaty, ceding your port access to me, or Doctor. Cade's review of your mother's transplant application will become permanent. The choice is yours." The storm broke not with a whimper, but with a roar. The nor'easter slammed into Ashbrook like a fist, turning the sky black and the world into a churning chaos of wind and water. Inside the estate, the lights flickered, held steady for a moment by the massive generators, then died completely, plunging us into a sudden, disorienting darkness. A moment later, the backup generators kicked in with a deep groan, but the lights were weak, unsteady. The storm was winning. And in that moment of flickering vulnerability, Morella's heart gave out. The monitors in her ICU wing shrieked in unison, a piercing chorus of disaster. I was at her side in an instant. Her blood pressure had bottomed out. Her heart was failing to pump. A catastrophic circulatory collapse. This wasn't the slow decline I had been fighting. This was a sudden, violent plunge. I knew, with a sickening certainty. What had happened? Cade had made his final move. A loyalist on the staff, a cleaner or a KitchenAid, must have swapped her IV bag during the power fluctuation, replacing my carefully calibrated medication with a final, useless dose from the old tainted supply. "She's crashing. I need the ECMO cart. Now!" I yelled into the chaos. The estate's power grid was too unstable to support the machine. The main generator was sputtering, drowning in the deluge. We had one option: the portable, transport-ready, ECMO unit with its own battery pack, but to evacuate her, we needed the medevac helicopter, and it couldn't land safely near the trees. The only viable landing zone was the stone terrace on the second floor, exposed to the full, screaming fury of the storm. What followed was a nightmare ballet of controlled panic. We raced the gurney out onto the terrace. The wind hit us like a physical blow, tearing at our clothes, trying to rip the sterile drapes from Morella's bed. The rain was a solid, blinding curtain of water. Tarek, a man who seemed carved from granite, held a heavy canvas tarp over us, his body straining against the gale, creating a tiny, pathetic pocket of relative calm. Cassian was on his knees at his mother's side, his hands, steady and sure, holding the heavy ECMO tubes in place as I prepared to cannulate. His suit was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes never left my face, trusting me completely in the heart of this maelstrom. Above us, the Northstead helicopter descended, its searchlight cutting a ghostly white cone through the storm. The rotor wash was a hurricane within a hurricane, threatening to send everything flying. The terrace, slick with rain, was as treacherous as a sheet of ice. "I need a light! Hold it steady!" I shouted over the deafening roar. June appeared at my side with a high-powered flashlight, her face a pale, determined mask in its narrow, focused beam. I saw the landmarks on Morella's skin. I had one chance to get this right. My own heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were rock steady. My training took over, a calm island in the ocean of chaos. I advanced the large-bore needle, found the vessel. Flashback of dark blood. I threaded the guide wire. I whispered reassurances to Morella, though she couldn't hear me over the tempest. "Stay with me. Morella, you're a fighter. Just hold on." The lines were in. I connected the circuit. With a soft hum, the ECMO machine came to life, its internal pump taking over the work of Morella's failing heart and lungs. Her blood, dark and oxygen-deprived, flowed out through one tube and returned through the other. A miraculous, life-sustaining shade of bright red. Her vitals on the portable monitor began to stabilize. For a single, breathless moment, there was a lull in the wind, in the chaotic strobe of the helicopter's lights. Cassian looked up at me. His face was slick with rain, his eyes a reflection of the storm, filled with a terrifying mixture of fear, gratitude, and something deeper, something that mirrored the fierce, desperate love in my own heart. He surged forward, closing the space between us. His cold, wet hands cupped my face, and his mouth found mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of desperation. It was a promise in the face of death, a raw, silent oath that we would survive this. It lasted only a second, a single, indelible point of stillness in the swirling vortex. Then he pulled back, and we were back to work. Our shared mission, the only thing that mattered. As the flight crew rushed forward to help us load Morella onto the helicopter, Paloma Vescari ran out onto the terrace, her phone clutched in a plastic bag. She screamed over the wind to Cassian, "It's Cade and Morello. They're moving the records. They're taking them to the Seabright Aquarium, now. Using the storm for cover. If we don't get those files tonight, they'll be gone forever. The paper trail is the only thing a court will believe." Cassian's entire demeanor changed. The fearful son vanished, replaced by the commander. "Tarek," he yelled, "get the team ready. We're going in." "No!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the wind. He turned to look at me, his eyes questioning. "You can't," I said, grabbing his arm. "Look at me. This is the choice. The doctor or the crime lord. You can't be both tonight." I gestured to the helicopter. "My fight is up there. I'm going to the hospital with your mother. I will keep her alive. Your fight is down here. You go get that evidence. You get the proof that will put Cade away and give your mother a future. But you do it, and you come back. You come back safe. That's the only way we win." He stared at me, the truth of my words sinking in. He was being torn in two, but he knew I was right. He gave a sharp, decisive nod. The roles were cast. "Tarek," Cassian commanded. "You stay. Secure the estate. No one gets in or out." Tarek nodded, a silent guardian. Cassian then looked at me and June. "Go. I'll see you at the hospital." June and I climbed into the helicopter with Morella, the doors sliding shut, enclosing us in a bubble of noise and light. As we lifted off, I looked down. I saw Cassian, a lone figure on the terrace, turning to face Paloma. Then they were gone. Two figures swallowed by the rain and darkness, heading for a derelict aquarium and a final confrontation. At the hospital, it was organized chaos. We bypassed the emergency room and went straight to the cardiac ICU. I worked with the team, transferring Morella from the portable ECMO to the hospital's more powerful stationary unit. But there was a problem. One of the oxygenator's pressure valves was fluctuating, a sign of a potential clot. The standard adult replacement valves were out of stock, a casualty of the storm's disruption to deliveries. I got on the internal line, my mind racing. "This is Dr. Merrick in the CICU. I need to speak with the head of pediatric cardiology. Now, I know you have them. Your ECMO circuits use a smaller, quarter-inch polymer valve. I need one. It's for an off-label adult application, but the pressure tolerances are compatible. It is an emergency." It was a long shot, a desperate piece of medical improvisation. As I waited for the pediatric team to answer, my secure phone buzzed, a text from Cassian, an encrypted two-word message that made my blood freeze. "Trap inside." The clock was ticking. The storm outside was reaching its crescendo, its fury a mirror of the two desperate battles being waged within its heart, in the sterile, fluorescent world of the ICU. I was fighting a war of millimeters and pressure gradients to save one life, miles away, in a decaying palace of glass and water. Cassian was walking into an ambush, fighting a war of secrets and survival to save us all. My world had shrunk to the size of a hospital room, a sterile bubble of beeping machines and the quiet, rhythmic whoosh of the ECMO circuit. The storm raged outside, a distant, muffled beast, but in here, the only storm that mattered was the one I was fighting inside Morella Riva's body. The pediatric valve was a perfect fit, a small miracle of improvisation, but her system was fragile. Teetering on a knife's edge, every beat of her heart was a battle won. Then my secure phone buzzed, vibrating against the hard surface of a steel counter. It was Tarek. His voice was a low, urgent growl, distorted by the wind and the cavernous acoustics of his location. The background was a cacophony of dripping water and echoing footsteps. "We're inside the main hall of the aquarium," he said, his words clipped. "It's a setup. They're all here." The monitor above Morella's bed beeped a soft alarm. Her arterial pressure was dropping. I adjusted a dial on the ECMO pump. My focus split between two worlds, two lives hanging in the balance. "What do you see, Tarek?" I asked, my voice a low, steady command. "Cade, Vega Morello, and at least 8 of his men. They're holding a heavy-duty Pelican case. They were waiting for us." Through the phone, I heard Cassian's voice, cold and clear despite the distortion. "You wanted a meeting. Vega, you have it." Then another voice, smooth and laced with arrogance. "Dr. Nolan Cade. Cassian, always a pleasure. We have a simple business proposition for you." "I'm not here for business," Cassian countered. "Oh, but you are," Vega Morello's voice cut in, rougher, laced with menace. "This is the final negotiation. In this case," I heard a metallic click, "is everything you need. The real ledgers, the unredacted shipping manifests, the evidence to clear your doctor friend and put Cade away for a very long time. We'll even throw in a priority 1 flag on the transplant list for Mommy Dearest, a direct line to the top of the list." My breath caught. It was the perfect bait. "The price is simple," Vega continued. "You sign this, a permanent, binding transfer of your family's access to the Baymore shipping lanes." I could picture the scene, the derelict aquarium, its massive, cracked tanks like the dead eyes of leviathans, Cassian outnumbered, standing before his 2 greatest enemies, Cade, the smiling psychopath in a lab coat, holding the proof of his own crimes, Vega, the rival predator, offering a deal with a poisoned blade. Morella's monitor beeped again, more insistently this time. Her oxygen saturation was falling. "June," I said, my voice tight, not taking my eyes off the monitor. "Increase the oxygen sweep by 10% now." "What's happening?" Tarek's voice crackled in my ear. "He's stalling," I whispered, both to him and to myself. "He's buying you time." Through the phone, I heard Cassian say, "Let me see the documents." A tense silence followed, then a sudden, deafening crash of metal, a groaning, screeching sound that made me flinch. "What was that?" I demanded. "Paloma," Tarek breathed. "She sabotaged the old service elevator, the brake line, created a diversion." Then a new sound, a gunshot, a single sharp crack that was immediately followed by the shattering of glass. Tarek's voice was a roar. "Lights out." My phone speaker was plunged into a cacophony of shouts, grunts, and the sudden, terrifying darkness that Tarek had created. All I could hear was the relentless dripping of water, a sound like the world's slowest, most merciless clock. Out of the darkness, Cade's voice rose, no longer smooth, but shrill with a megalomaniacal fury. "You think this is about medicine? You sentimental fool. There is no medicine. There is only accounting. Patients are liabilities. Cures are assets, and a dying matriarch is the perfect leverage. It's all just numbers on a balance sheet." The world exploded into noise, a barrage of close-quarters gunfire. The frantic, desperate sound of a firefight in a hall of echoes. "Tarek, report," I yelled, my own voice drowned out by the chaos. "Cassian's hit shoulder," Tarek yelled back. "He's got the case. He's going for Cade." My heart stopped. Cassian hit in the same instant. Morella's monitor blared, a long, flat tone of critical alarm. Her heart had gone into a lethal arrhythmia. The two people I was fighting to save were both crashing at the exact same time. 2 heartbeats, both in my hands, miles apart. The choice was brutal. It was instant. It was no choice at all. Morella was my patient. I was by her side. I could not leave. "June, charge the defibrillator to 200, I commanded, my hands already moving, grabbing the paddles. "Tarek, listen to me. Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear," he yelled over another burst of gunfire. "I am talking you through field trauma care. Put me on speaker. Cassian needs you right now." I took a deep breath, compartmentalizing, becoming 2 doctors at once. "Clear," I shouted, pressing the paddles to Morella's chest. Her body arched. My eyes flicked to the monitor. A rhythm returned, weak, but it was there. "Tarek, is he conscious?" I demanded. "He is. He's fighting." "The wound, where on the shoulder?" "High, near the collarbone." "Is the bleeding pulsing or flowing?" "Flowing, dark red." "Good, no artery. Listen to me carefully. You need to apply direct, immense pressure. Take whatever you have a piece of your shirt, anything clean, and pack it into the wound. Do you understand? Pack it tight and do not let up." Through the phone, I could hear a new sound, a massive rush of water. "The main tank just went," Tarek shouted. "The place is flooding." I could hear Vega yelling curses, the sound of men slipping and falling on the wet floor. I could hear papers, precious evidence, scattering like wet birds. "Did you get the drive?" It was Cassian's voice, strained with pain. "I have it," Paloma's voice, sharp and clear. "Go get out of here." "Tara," I commanded, my voice a lifeline of pure command across the miles of storm and chaos. "After you pack the wound, you need to create a pressure dressing. Use a belt, a strip of cloth, anything, wrap it tight, then elevate his arm above his heart. Prop it on something. You need to slow the bleeding." "Got it," he grunted. I could hear him tearing cloth, his breath heavy with exertion. I could also hear Morella's monitor begin to stabilize, her heart finding its fragile rhythm again. I was fighting on 2 fronts, with knowledge as my only weapon. Then, Tarek's voice again, breathless. "Cade is making a run for it. He's heading for the east exit." "Don't let him go. Tarek, we need him." "I can't. I'm with Cassian." A sudden, sharp click echoed through the phone's speaker. It was the sound of a heavy door being bolted. "He's not going anywhere," Paloma's voice said. It was strangely calm. I heard her take a deep breath. "Cassian," she said, her voice softer now, filled with a universe of regret. "I'm sorry." Then I heard Tarek's sharp intake of breath. "Paloma, no!" I didn't hear what happened next. I only heard the sound of her footsteps moving away from the phone, and then a final, single gunshot, its report flat and absolute in the echoing, watery darkness, the sound of a debt being paid in full. The final gunshot echoed in my memory, a sound of terrible finality that was immediately swallowed by the urgent, life-saving beeps of the ICU. My world was a split screen. One half filled with the ghostly image of a derelict aquarium, the other with the stark, brightly lit reality of Morella's fight for life. The arrhythmia was controlled, her heart once again beating in a fragile rhythm dictated by the machine. But I knew we were living on borrowed time. Then the doors to the CICU burst open. Tarek, his face a grim mask of rain and exhaustion, helped a staggering Cassian through the entrance. He was pale, his left arm held tight against his body, a makeshift pressure dressing already soaked through with a dark, spreading stain. My remote instructions had kept him alive, but he needed a surgeon. In that moment, two paths diverged in my mind. The lover in me wanted to rush to his side, to touch him, to assess the damage myself. But the doctor, the commander of this medical battlefield, saw the chessboard. "Get him to trauma room 3 inches. I snapped to a waiting nurse. "Page doctor. Evans, head of general surgery. Tell him I'm on my way." I turned back to Morella's bedside, my hands moving with practiced efficiency, checking the ECMO lines, adjusting her medication drip. I handed over her care to the lead ICU physician, a man I trusted implicitly. "Her pressures are stable for now, but she's on a razor's edge. Call me with any change. I met the surgical team in the scrub room. As I pulled on my own sterile gloves and mask, my focus narrowed to a single point. The man I loved was now my patient. I walked into the trauma room. Cassian was on the table, his face tight with pain as they cut away his sodden shirt. The wound was ugly, a deep channel carved through the muscle and tissue of his shoulder. But my initial assessment was a surge of relief. Tarek's pressure dressing had done its job. The major arteries were intact. He was going to live. As I began the work of repairing the damaged vessels, a different kind of surgery was happening outside the hospital walls. Tarek, his duty to Cassian fulfilled, had met Maya Lorne in the hospital's quiet pre-dawn lobby. He handed her 2 items, the hard drive Paloma had died for, and a waterproof bag filled with the soggy, priceless paper files. Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't go to the compromised IFC. She made 2 calls, one to a trusted contact inside the newly formed Metropolitan Integrity Bureau, and another to the state prosecutor's office. She sent them each a digital copy of the drive and a manifest of the paper files. The wheels of real justice began to turn. The results were swift and decisive. Vega Morello was apprehended at a private boat dock, trying to flee the city under the cover of the storm's aftermath. His empire, built on fear, crumbled in the face of cold, hard data. Doctor. Nolan Cade's reckoning was more personal. He was apprehended in the main corridor of Northstead, not a block from my own office. I was there. I had just finished stitching Cassian's wound and was walking down the hall when 2 state investigators, accompanied by hospital security, approached him. Cade, ever the performer, feigned polite confusion. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" One of the investigators held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was the manifest he had signed, his arrogant, flowing signature clearly visible. "Dr. Cade," the investigator said, his voice flat. "Is this your signature, authorizing the receipt of a shipment of restricted sedatives from Harborgate Logistics?" Cade's face went white. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, and they landed on me. I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. I held up my own phone, displaying the photo I had taken of the signed document. His composure finally, irrevocably shattered. He was placed in handcuffs, the clicking of the metal a final. satisfying end to his reign of medical terror. With Cade's influence gone, the administrative hold on Morella's transplant case vanished. The system, freed from corruption, began to work as it should. And in the darkest hour of the night, the call came. A donor heart, a viable, perfect match, being flown in from a neighboring state. I led the pre-operative consultation. My two worlds converging, I was the lead cardiologist, explaining the procedure to the family. And the family was Cassian, sitting by the window, his arm in a sling, his face etched with exhaustion and a fragile, burgeoning hope. When it was time, the transplant team assembled. I walked to the operating room doors, then paused, turning back to him. The man who commanded a criminal enterprise looked small in that moment, like a lost boy. I walked back to him, placed my hand on his good shoulder, and leaned in. "Wait for me," I whispered. It was a command, a promise, and a prayer. The surgery was long, complex, a delicate dance of science and skill, but it was flawless. As the first rays of the post-storm sun broke through the clouds, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the new heart began to beat inside Morella Riva's chest. Strong, steady, a rhythm of hope. Later that morning, I stood with Cassian, looking through the glass of the recovery room. Morella was awake. She turned her head, her eyes finding ours. A slow, weak smile spread across her face. Cassian's hand found mine, his grip tight. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep. But for the first time since I had met him again, they were light. The terrible weight in their depths finally lifted. Downstairs, Maya Lorne held a press conference. She laid out the entire conspiracy with surgical precision, the Heartline Foundation as a money laundering front, the local IFCO officials who had been bought, the trail of counterfeit drugs. She announced that all the evidence had been turned over to federal authorities. Cassian stood at the edge of the crowd, a silent observer in a plain dark suit. He sought no credit, no glory. As Maya spoke, he was quietly signing a different set of papers, a binding commitment to transition his family's assets into a fully legitimate corporate structure. The first act of that new corporation was to establish the Morella Riva Foundation, an organization dedicated to fighting counterfeit pharmaceuticals. I found him later on the hospital rooftop. The air was cool and clean, washed by the storm. The city of Ashbrook spread out before us, glistening in the new morning. "I'm going to testify," he said, not looking at me, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Against Morello's network, against the corrupt officials, all of it. The price for my family's old power. I'll pay it myself." I stepped closer to him, reaching up to gently touch the fresh line of stitches on his shoulder, a new scar that bound us together. "You won't pay it alone," I said softly. He turned to face me, and I leaned in and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, not of desperation or hunger, but of promise. It was the first day of a new, uncertain future. We didn't promise each other a life without danger, a life of absolute safety. That was a fantasy. We promised each other something more real, more important. No more secrets. From her room, Morella could see the rooftop garden. She watched us. Two figures standing close together against the skyline. She turned to June, who was adjusting her pillows, and whispered, her voice still weak but filled with a new strength. "Love," she said, "when it's prioritized correctly, is the most durable therapy of all." The final piece clicked into place at 8:59 a.m. the next morning. A federal judge, acting on the evidence from the Seabright Aquarium, signed a sweeping order. It mandated a full, independent audit of the entire regional pharmaceutical supply chain. The door to a safer future had been kicked open. It would be a long, difficult road, but as I stood on that rooftop, with Cassian's hand in mine, I knew we wouldn't be walking it alone, and I knew that only together were we strong enough to walk through it. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below to say hello and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And to help this story reach even more people, please consider supporting us by hitting the hype button. Your support means the world to us.